That'd be great.
Okay, hi everyone. So Michael here. We had in our group David, we had Peter, Rachel, Jennifer, and Kyron, and I'll run through the points that were shared. There was quite a lot of things that came up, but the main point that came, David pointed out that his realization was how important is the idea of allies and indeed supporting each other. So he shared a history of moving from one place to another, and not being that familiar with certain parts of the community, say in Florida, then moving to North Carolina, and suddenly having more people around him that he was aware of and could connect, and that idea of sort of working together and as allies was really sort of prominent for him. Peter just was very straightforward. I need to put some, I need to put some action into the workplace. He works or run a place with 25 people, so relatively quite a small place. But he wants to make sure that the induction process and there's procedures, there's processes that acknowledge and actually create practice of inclusion from here onwards. So really take action on it. Similarly, Rachel pointed out that they actually had a really good way of presenting inclusion and diversity in their lobby and in the way that they sort of dress up at work. So there's pins on the dresses, and there's accoutrement around the lobby so people can see that this is a really inclusive workplace. But now that everyone has gone into Zoom, there is the lack of that symbolism that was mentioned as so important. So she's going to take some time and pay attention to how to upgrade, in a sense, this symbolism, so it also shows up in their meetings and in their workplace while they working remotely. Um, Jennifer, we had two people from the US, which was fantastic. So David and Jennifer. Jennifer also from the US, and she pointed out something really interesting, and that is that in the whole conversation that we're talking about now, there is almost like a bigger conversation, and that is how do you hold viewpoint diversity in general, not just in the LGBT plus sort of communities and issues that we're trying to discuss, but in between people of different races, and certainly by being from the US, this idea that the politics have very much split the country, and there is a real issue in terms of just accepting other people, allowing other people to ask questions, that instead of just reacting for the fact that if they're asking a question about it, that means that they're an enemy straight away. So this idea of continuous discussion and exposing people to other opinions and ideas is really quite important. And Kyron, who's Katura's mum, wanted to point out that from her understanding, one of the things that is kind of missing in the conversation is that there is an underlaying of empathy that should be kind of like the driving force. And I hope I'm understanding your point, Kyron, correctly, but it should be the driving force in terms of how we connect with each other, regardless of what community we belong to. There is a sort of almost like a basement level that we should look at. And that brought us to a really interesting discussion about what is the need for community. Shouldn't we just be all just people and really sort of use empathy and use connectedness to see each other as just people, rather than in a sense diversify but also kind of protect people through saying this is my community and so on. And Rachel pointed out at that point in the discussion, Rachel pointed out that we're still not there. In other words, there's people in the community who truthfully, empathy will be really useful and helpful to support them, but not everyone is on board with that empathy. Not everyone is on board with that conversation. And while we have animosity, in the larger crowds, we certainly do need protective communities for certain circles so they can feel safe and comfortable. And I think certainly we've seen the last conversation in Australia. That's my own opinion I'm putting onto it. But the last conversation in the last few weeks around the issues of gender, you would have thought that Australia doesn't have any issues with protecting women, and yet here we are again. So I definitely resonate with that discussion, that we need empathy for everyone, but we also need community to protect.